It is 6 o'clock, right on the dot. Hope everyone is doing well. This is probably something new that folks aren't normally used to. Normally we host these things on Zoom. I'm testing things out and playing around on YouTube, seeing how live streaming stuff works. Hopefully we can use this to kind of better spread the information that we have. Thank you for anybody who showed up right at 6 o'clock. If you want to chat in the live chat, feel free to go ahead. I believe it's set right now to subscribers only. You won't get annoying notifications all the time. We only go live every now and then. But if you want to just chime in and say hi, I can answer questions throughout the evening. I am Aiden. I normally am based in the Bay Area. I am the statewide organizer of California Working Families Party. I am based in Sunnyvale, to be specific. Some folks think of the Bay Area as San Francisco. There's a lot more to it than that. I have been organizing with WFP close to 2 years now, year and a half, closing in on 2 years. Absolutely love it, love the work we're doing, but I want to introduce it to the rest of everyone else. So I do want to kind of just jump right into this. I don't want to waste folks' time. The main thing I wanted to really get into is the community agreements for this evening. If folks are new to this space, I invite you to take space and make space. I mean, if you are brand new to this environment, I encourage you to share and chat, and you don't have to introduce yourself. You can stay anonymous. But you can chat in the chat and maybe talk with other folks. You can talk with me. But if you are someone who normally does talk a lot in spaces like this, I encourage you to maybe take a step back. But if no one is active in the chat, you are more than welcome to do so. And introduce yourself if you want to. Another thing is what happens here stays here, and what is learned here leaves here. So anything that folks say, this is a growing space, this is a learning space, this is a space that folks maybe are not used to interacting in. So I encourage folks to really just say, hey, I'm new here. All folks are welcome here. And then the other piece that's related to this is speak from your own experience and use I statements. So trying to avoid making sweeping generalizations, say like, oh, you know, I think such and such, or I believe whatever. It really helps shape the conversation and all these things based upon your own lived experience, rather than just kind of making sweeping generalizations about anything else and about other folks. Normally, I'd ask folks to give a thumbs up in the chat, says like, cool, I agree. Any reactions, totally good to put in the chat, just so I know that folks are aware and have paid attention to what I said. With that, then, I kind of want to jump into really what we are as a party. This whole purpose of this evening is to introduce folks to who we are. This is a great space to learn what we are as WFP without getting into like a lot of the nitty gritty that we do on a day-to-day basis. So really going into this is our theory of change. And this essentially is what we consider our North Star as WFP. So to build a multiracial, feminist, working people's political party of the American left that wins governing power to enact a structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. Kind of a mouthful, but this really encapsulates a lot of what we strive to achieve and strive towards supporting along the way. If this is something that you vibe with, again, feel free to chime in the chat. I think it's still set on subscriber only mode, so you have to subscribe in order to chat to WFP. I really find this to be a super useful North Star, because when folks ask, oh, what does your political party look like? What does it stand for? What is it supposed to be? This really encapsulates everything that we are trying to focus on. So I think the three main pieces of the stuff that's highlighted in that orangish red color: who we are a political party of and who are we for, what we're trying to do. So it's trying to win governing power, which is kind of different from a lot of fringe groups that always see power as something that corrupts entirely. We like to think of things a little more positively. There are things that we need to accomplish through governing power. And then the last piece, and I think I want to highlight another thing before that, is the structural reform. Reform, I know, can be tricky of a word to use in some of these spaces, but structural is something that we see as their underlying issues, and little band-aid fixes cannot be enough to solve these issues. And some of these issues, of course, being saving the planet, the whole global warming, and all of the people on it. This is not like, oh, we only support these people in America. It's a whole global system here, and we're supporting everyone who lives and participates here. So that's our North Star. Getting into the next piece of kind of what we see as the main struggle of where we're at with political parties in the United States. Without getting too much into it, I do want to cover the main four pieces that we have, and those are basically these four here. The authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. It's something that's been on the rise over, depending on how much you've paid attention and like kind of know the roots of the GOP and stuff. So I really think this is something that is great and important to really highlight because of just how prevalent it is and how blatant folks are with their support of these just white nationalist and ethno-religious takes. The other thing that we're seeing is the party that was supposed to hold them accountable, or says they like to, is that the Democratic Party is controlled by wealthy and corporate forces. What this means is that while on some social issues, the Democrats may oppose Republicans, on a lot of economic issues that we see, they go hand in hand. And then when you look at foreign policy, there's largely a not big difference between the two parties there. Another piece that we're seeing is that with this and who the Democratic Party is really listening to, the Democrats are losing working class people of all races. This may be different in different states depending on the demographics, but in California we're seeing Latinos, African American, Asian, white, a bunch of folks of the working class being disillusioned with the Democratic Party. And the other piece that we're seeing is the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. You may have heard sometimes that you don't change the Democratic Party changes you. So trying to work the system being the Democratic Party and their control on left, I would say liberal politics and policies, is something that often goes in not really successful. So kind of just jumping into these little pieces a little more. The authoritarian white nationalists take over the GOP. It sometimes in California, it's easy to be like, oh, we're a super blue state. I'll get into it later, like just how not blue we really are. But this is a party that is the party of Donald J. Trump and the party of white nationalists. I mean, the blatant white nationalism that comes out from folks in the Republican Party and the GOP really goes to showing just how much they see it as something, one, they believe in, and two, as a winning strategy to really take power. It does not come to voting elections. It's a way to take power. And it's increasingly become a clear and present danger to communities across California, communities across the country, and communities across the world as they enact different methods to retain and hold power. If folks want to chime in on kind of what this looks like in your area, depending on where you are in the state, or if you're joining us from outside of California, what this kind of shows up in your areas or something that you've noticed recently, feel free again to chime in on the chat. But I do want to move forward. The other thing too is, and I mentioned this earlier, the corporate and wealthy control of the Democratic Party. This really is something that, where we see, even despite them saying they're good on social issues, it maintains the electoral system that really favors them and the Republicans, and it maintains the economic and tax system. It supports the status quo. You won't get change, fundamental structural change, through the Democratic Party. And so when you have corporate and wealthy forces leading a whole political party, you end up really struggling to make any changes, having grassroots voices heard and supported. And of course, the next thing, you lose working class people because they see the party as someone who doesn't support their values and everything that they do. Two-party system limits our room to maneuver. Folks often think of third parties as a spoiler problem. You might hear like, oh, why is this person not running as a Democrat or Republican? They could end up having the Republican or the conservative candidate winning. Yes, but I do want to address that when we get to it. It does force folks into like an alignment of strategic voting. I'd put strategic in quotations because it isn't so strategic as it is catering towards a larger swing voters who are elderly and wider and typically more affluent. So you really then have to end up listening to a certain amount of folks that don't represent the values of the working class. Not that it's entirely one or the other, but that's something that we see. So how do we see this happening in terms of Democrats losing working class folks of all races? It's a really big thing where we're seeing that folks just don't care for politics. I mean, like, oh, the political process doesn't work for me. And one of the things I want to highlight and really acknowledge is that is not a bug. That is a feature of the system. That is something that is built into how this system really works. It's like, okay, working class folks don't have a voice when it comes to enacting policies and like supporting politicians and holding them accountable. They don't get to take time off to go lobby folks in Sacramento or DC, or even go to the city council meetings that are often not accessible to folks who take maybe public transit or have a normal 9 to 5 or need like a babysitter. So there's a lot of things that really the Democrats just don't end up supporting working class folks because there's just no incentive for them to do so. Which again is like leads to the circular, all right, then Democrats are going to continue losing them. So that really gets us to the main point of this. And again, like I mentioned, folks think a third party, they think spoiler. But I really want to kind of nail this down to something else. This is really what and how we define what a political party is. It's these 4 things. It's organizing people together to do elections around a platform governed by a clear ideology. So nowhere in here does it say that, oh, we need to be on the ballot per se as a specific party line. In some states we are. In California, for example, we are not an official party in the sense of you'll see us on the ballot. In states like New York, you will see WFP candidates and WFP on the ballot itself there. This really allows us to maneuver through the 2-party system without being beholden to like, oh, this is a spoiler issue that we can see coming up. So I'll really move on from here into saying this is, I think, probably one of the best quotes that really summarizes and amplifies what the North Star is. I could never do enough justice as the way our national director Maurice Mitchell would say it, but I'll just read it aloud for folks. In order to build the world we need, we have to dismantle racism and sexism. We need to build an economy that puts people and the planet ahead of profit. To accomplish this, we need a political revolution that will transform our government by taking power from the billionaires and warmongers and putting it in the hands of the majority of Americans. So this really expands upon the North Star. And it's like, okay, there are things that we need to dismantle that there's no place for whatsoever. Racism, sexism, you could add things like capitalism in there, colonialism. All of those pieces need to be dismantled. And part of that then translates into we build an economy, and you can go into the whole capitalism piece, that puts people and the planet ahead of profit. And with this, we can transform our government. Again, there's degrees to which folks think transform as something that pacifies the existing structure, or you can really remold it and shape it into something else. And with that, it's like taking the power from the billionaires and warmongers and putting it in the hands of majority Americans. So I would include millionaires in that too, but millionaires and billionaires, the ultra rich, and the warmongers. There's not necessarily a one-to-one overlap between the two. We see folks who are supportive of war for a variety of reasons, choose to wage war for whatever, I don't want to say silly or petty because it's just cruel the reasons that folks choose to go down this path, but they are currently the ones, and we're seeing this in who we're supporting just across conflicts across the globe, not just recently with Israel and Gaza, but in conflicts for decades and centuries at this point now when it comes to the US. But bringing things back a bit more to California, I really want to go over really the actual situation of what we're facing here in California, because this is something that folks often overlook, whether they're either from California themselves or just think of California in like a political sense. When it comes to presidential elections and these larger, big name issues, folks are like, oh, we're going to vote blue. California is a safe Democrat win for them. Yes, but that's not the full picture of how folks actually vote, especially in the same election. So the example here is Prop 15, which was held in the same year as the general election in 2020. You can see the votes and like how it turned out side by side here. This is the same election. So in a lot of the areas that are blue for Biden, those didn't necessarily translate over to Prop 15. And if you're unfamiliar with Prop 15, this was around the Schools and Communities First Prop 13 reform, essentially, in California. So even with a lot of the blues for Biden, we still have red undertones within California. And it basically looks like this fishhook of, okay, while there are some blue strongholds that remain blue, there's a lot of areas that need to really be focused on. And this is what hinders us from passing progressive legislation. So how do we tackle this as a political party? I want to just quickly go over what it is that we are made of as California WFP. On the state steering level, we have a state steering committee that encompasses all of California, and we are made up of 3 different pillars. The first being statewide labor organizations, the second being statewide community groups or C4s, and then regional charters, which translates to a regional member rep at that point. These are the 7 regional charters that we have. Each of them has a designated staffer for all of them. I'm a statewide organizer, so I help out everywhere. So if you have an issue in any one of your regions, feel free to reach out to me. I will share the contact information for the other organizers at the end of this. But these are the 7. So it's going to be the Bay Area, Central Coast, Central Valley. If you're in Sacramento, you are part of the Central Valley, LA County, Orange County, Inland Empire, and San Diego. If you have questions about where you fit or live, feel free to reach out to me, ask at any point. But these are the 7 regional charters. But being California, we are an entirely massive state. So it wasn't enough to just do regional charters and just kind of have things there. We needed to break things down a little more and have the regional charters each comprised of the 3 pillars themselves. So those were additional labor unions that may be organized on a local level, local community C4s, and individual members. So if you are a dues-paying member of California WFP, you have a member rep that you get to elect to become someone who's voting for endorsements, policy decisions, anything that gets voted on at a regional level. Individual members can become member reps that can vote on those issues. Again, if you have questions about that at any point, feel free to reach out to me and what that looks like. And I just want to quickly share some of the organizations that make up each of the regional groups and the statewide one as well. Here on the left side, we have the statewide organizations. It is missing 2 right now. I forgot to update it, but NUHW and Project Super Bloom are 2 of the ones that joined this year. These are some of the other organizations. And then on the right side, you can see the regional and local organizations that make up the steering committees on the regional levels. So again, we have a bunch of folks that organize locally because we know in California there's a lot of people that do a lot of this work. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we form coalitions with these folks and really to enact change. And we're always looking to include more folks along the way. This is just a snapshot of where we are at this moment. Moving from there, I really want to get into where we're kind of looking as California WFP. We have a strategic direction. We have our North Star, yes, but how do we get from where we are now to where we're trying to get to? So there's a couple of things that we see as like a main focus for this upcoming year and kind of what we were preparing on this last year. Expand the state legislative squad. I'll explain who those are and what that means. But we're looking to expand them in 4 to 5 key races and upgrade liberal Dem seats to more progressive seats. So there's 3 more in the Senate, 2 more in the Assembly. For those of you who don't know, the Assembly is basically our House of Representatives. Here in California, the Senate is also called the Senate. Focus on the pipeline and development for local races. So Board of Supervisors, municipality races, school board races, water board, whatever kind of race it is. We really want to support folks at any level who are trying to enact progressive change or support progressive policies for the working class. It says especially Central Valley, Alameda, and the IE. This is just an example. We can list off all the different places where we see that it would be beneficial to support more grassroots campaigns and candidates. But those are just some of the areas that we really want to focus on too. And then work with the federal team to take back 2 to 4 congressional seats and expand progressives in Congress. There's always a bunch of folks who continue to resign even at the last minute. We had one recently in the South Bay area with Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. These always provide opportunities to expand the progressives in Congress. We don't have necessarily big squad members here in California like the East Coast does, but it would be great if we continue to build those folks out while also retaking some of the Republican seats from folks. Again, I know I'm doing a lot of the talking, but feel free to chime in at any time in the chat. Happy to talk with folks if folks want questions answered now. But kind of getting into what we're seeing at the state legislative level, this looks like a lot. This is the cleanest it could possibly look like, so I apologize. But this essentially is the breakdown of how we see the state assembly. There are folks, you can see the system, the scale at the top, you see systemic on the left side, and then reactionary on the top right. And then right dead center in the middle are the neoliberals. Folks, again, have varying degree of neoliberalism in their policy. So these are not, I wouldn't say, just clear cut, oh, this person's 100% progressive, 100% liberal, 100% corporate Dem. Although that's a little easier to kind of define. But this is just kind of how we put people on like the scale here and like how we see them as votes towards enacting things like universal single payer healthcare in California or like a Green New Deal, a lot of policies that have been hamstrung by corporate Dems and sometimes even some of the liberals who won't always side on the progressive side of things. So listed here are 24 current assembly members. I believe they're all current right now. I don't think anyone has resigned recently. But the folks in purple, or highlighted in purple, are folks that we have endorsed. The green ones are open seats. There's a couple in here that need to be updated, I believe, unless we're all good there. And then the rest of the black ones are what we consider, again, progressives. But as you can see, we need more than just these folks and the liberals to really get a full majority here in the assembly. 41 votes are needed to be a majority. That doesn't even include the 53 needed for a supermajority, where it's easier to pass anything tax related in the assembly. So with a 24 and then 10, it only gets us to 34. So expanding that group from where it is now to include more folks allows us to get closer to that majority. Granted, we still have a long fight ahead of us, but this is what helps us be strategic in focusing on what we needed to focus on. And then on the other side of things, you can see that there's still 28 corporate Dems. I mean, they get bankrolled through these large corporations that fund their campaigns. They get lobbied. They're the ones that you typically think of when you think of a politician, the folks schmoozing over at the bar with some lobbyist who takes them out for wine nights in Napa Valley or something. So there's still a handful of those folks that we are trying to hopefully unseat, but being mindful at the same time that they have a lot of money behind them. So it's not let's like, okay, let's throw a bunch of money and resources at someone who's very well entrenched at this moment. If folks have questions about this, feel free to let me know. Another benefit of us being on YouTube is shortly after this is finished streaming, it'll be available to watch. So you can share with folks. You can look back to this for reference at any point. So that's another benefit. So I do want to jump over to the Senate side of things. It's pretty similar in terms of the same kind of breakout of like corporate Dems, liberals, and progressives, except it leans a lot more towards the corporate Dem side, which is extremely unfortunate for us because while we are seeing a lot of progress in the assembly side of things, we run into the problem of those, a lot of the bills that we're trying to pass getting killed or watered down or severely weakened in the Senate because corporate Dems control a lot of the chairmanships in a lot of key committees. So I listed 3 here for reference. And in terms of progressives, there are only about 10 in the Senate. 21 votes are needed to be a majority, so we are still a little ways away from that. And 27 needed for the 2/3 supermajority. But again, that doesn't dissuade us from actually focusing on electing folks. There are a couple open seats. There are 8 open seats from the corporate Dems in this next coming election. So 2024, 8 corporate Dem seats are opening up, which gives us a big opportunity to pick up a lot of these seats and really get progressives in there so we can, 1, take some more of the committee chairmanships, and 2, really weaken the corporate Dem voting bloc that exists. Because currently corporate Dems, and they only need about 3 liberal Dems who can be pushed over to their side to pass a majority vote, which really hinders our ability to get progressive stuff going. I mentioned the squad earlier. In California, we have our own version of a squad. This is the Working Families Party squad. These are all folks here that we have endorsed for any state-led seat. Actually, I believe we endorsed one recently who's not listed here in Orange County. But these are the folks in 2024 that are going to be on the ballot. Some of them are current incumbents. Some of them are brand new to the political scene. Some folks are city council members. But not included here are the 2022 squad members who are not up for re-election this next year. And those include Senator Aisha Wahab, Senator Lola Smolay Cuevas, and then Senator Carolyn Menjivar. These folks really champion a lot of the progressive policies and legislation. For example, Assemblymember Ash Kalra introduces CalCare, the single-payer healthcare bill in California. Assemblymember Alex Lee does the wealth tax on the super rich. Let's see who else there is. Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, really big on criminal justice reform. Recently elected Senator, Assemblywoman Liz Ortega does a lot of stuff for unions. So there's a lot of folks who really enable these and champion these strong policies. And an example actually I'll give here about what we're seeing as roadblocks is Assemblymember Alex Lee introduced the wealth tax on the ultra-rich. If you are not familiar, I would encourage you to look it up. I believe we have an old recording. If folks are interested, I can share that with folks, where we interviewed him and Tristan Brown with CFT, who's one of the principal co-authors of the bill, talking about how much money can be raised in California alone with a wealth tax on the super rich. That bill was introduced at the beginning of this last year. However, it never got a committee hearing. So we're seeing things like there was no vote on it. No one was held accountable for their vote and voting no on these things. Committee chairs have the ability to hear and not hear certain legislation. So this is, despite having majorities sometimes, despite having a large folks that do support this legislation and would end up voting for it on the committee chairs are able to be like, okay, you know what, we're not going to have a hearing on this because I just don't like it. My donors, my campaign contributors don't want us to hear this for whatever reason. They get lobbied by whichever millionaires, billionaires are opposed to it at that time. But we see these things happen time and time again. And we see them either watering it down, and then in the severe cases like the wealth tax, just no hearing at all. That's basically what we're looking forward toward in terms of the state legislative side. These are only the folks so far endorsed for the March 2024 primary. So if there's someone that you are familiar with but just don't know about at this time, or you don't see them up here at this time, they could still make it to the primary, and we could endorse them for November. There are still folks joining into assembly races, so this is still a growing list. In 2022, the primary list was a little different from the general, as more folks made it through the primary and were able to compete with the more moderate and corporate Dems that we see. But just because we support candidates doesn't mean that we just like, cool, great, we got your back, you're on your own now. We like to support folks at every step of the way early on. Personally, one of my favorite things to do is do these campaign camps that we host. We hosted one in LA and then one in San Jose back in October with Hugo Soto Martinez, LA City Council member in SoCal, and then with Lisette Espinosa Garnica of Redwood City here in San Jose. We want to host more of these for folks who are interested later on in 2024. We're thinking after the primary, and so in April. If folks want something like this in their area, know of folks that are interested in these things, feel free to let us know. We are happy to set these up at any time. If you are more interested in virtual sessions and trainings, we also like to set those up as well. We do campaign fundraising, all the essentials that you need to run a campaign, phone banks and door knocking, everything you need. I eat, live, and breathe anything related to campaigns and this work, so you can reach out to me at any point. But these are the things that we like to do, and come next year, we're going to hope to do a lot more. One of the things that was really beneficial and had us worried for a while is we were fighting a recall in Santana against one of our first endorsed candidates in 2020, Jessie Lopez. She was the target of a recall by the Police Officers Association and realtors and corporate landlords in Santana. They basically could not buy her vote on city council, so they launched a completely bogus recall attempt that ended up going to a special election on November 14th. So they shoveled in hundreds of thousands of dollars. I believe they spent close to $700,000. It might actually be more now after when I look back on it, but it was an absurd amount of money to try to recall the Councilwoman Jessie Lopez. Thankfully, they failed at recalling her, but we really had to throw down and support her because this, again, it came completely bogus. They couldn't buy her vote, and it came down to a special election where this was the only thing on the ballot. So there was no top presidential thing on the ballot. There was nothing on the gubernatorial level or state legislative level. All of these things really came down to grassroots support from this campaign. So we are glad that Jessie was able to beat back this recall and not have to deal with us getting another one of our candidates. We were unsuccessful in defending Chesa Boudin, district attorney in San Francisco, which is one of the campaigns that I worked on. So that was, we're seeing this as a tool that the right and even corporate Dems and corporate interests are supporting along the way. And we're not just doing things around election seasons. We really enjoy supporting our electeds and supporting our members, supporting our folks throughout the years and not just in election season. So we host town halls. Pictured here at the top is with Merced City Councilmember Fu Zhang, and then another one with Lisette, who I mentioned earlier, Vice Mayor of Redwood City, Lisette Espinosa Garnica. Both were different focuses. Fu's in Merced was around budgetary process and how folks can get involved. Lisette's was on like youth criminal justice and supporting our youth in the city of Redwood City. And at the same time, we like to do socials as well. I mean, we have holiday parties coming up in the next 2 weeks. I will share the links for those as soon as I find where I put the Mobilize. But if you go on Mobilize after this event or any of our Mobilize pages, we have one this coming Friday in Bakersfield in San Francisco. The next week, Visalia, San Mateo, San Jose, and one in SoCal. So those are going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Again, there's no fee. There's nothing that you need to do. There's no, you can just show up, enjoy, have a great time with all of us. The next thing, if this would load, is some of the congressional action. We like to hold, and I don't want to say bully, but we like to remind congressional members, regardless of what party they are, even if they're Republican or Democrat, to really stand for the folks in the working class within their community. I mean, a lot of these folks, especially in the Central Valley, are Republican Congress members, but then their constituents are largely Latino and working class individuals who, again, like we've seen, are dissuaded and apathetic to the two-party political system. So these congressional members can basically get away with doing whatever they want and often not being held accountable within their district. So we like to remind them that they are to be held accountable to their own constituents. So we'll show up to their offices, we'll show up to their fundraisers, we'll do anything. So I think all of this stuff is super useful. We like to do these things. Hey, Divez, thanks for hopping in. But these are all things that we like to do along the ways. And another thing on the congressional side of things is the whole ceasefire situation. I could spend probably hours talking about this issue. This is something that is not new. I mean, maybe folks are, this was brought to their attention a lot more early on with the starting on October 7th, but this has been an issue going on for, depends on how long you want to look back on it, but at least 100 years if you go back to Britain and all of that in that timeline. But this is one of the upcoming events that we have. I dropped the link in the chat for one of this. We normally do phone banks every Wednesday around the ceasefire. This upcoming phone bank on this coming Wednesday is on the funding bill that they're trying to pass for more weapons for Israel and some of the other war-torn states that, and we're like, okay, no, this is not acceptable. We don't want our basically tax dollars to go towards funding these wars and the war crimes that are going on there. Unfortunately, it's hard to know where things are going to land along the way when it comes to what we're going to be phone banking around, just because we're doing this current phone bank around the funding for the against the weaponry at this time doesn't mean that we're not going to go back to the permanent ceasefire stuff. And again, we can go into the whole discussion around different asks around the ceasefire of like, okay, this is one step that we can take versus like, okay, permanent ceasefire is one piece. It doesn't address the whole thing, but it's a starting point to get us towards an end of the war. So I really see this as something that's super important, and I know it's a little tough because it is 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. One of the reasons it is not in the evening, especially for us here in California, is because congressional offices close at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So even though it's a little inconvenient for us, we want to make things even more inconvenient for Senate offices and congressional offices who have not yet taken a stance to oppose the funding or even have yet to be called for a ceasefire. So this is, again, a super important thing to do. If you yourself are unable to attend, you are more than welcome to share this link with anyone, share it with your networks and all that stuff. I can answer questions along the way. If folks have questions about, like, oh, what are you all doing for this stuff? I do say that on local levels, a lot of our endorsed candidates and endorsed elected officials have pushed for ceasefire resolutions in their respective cities across the state. Councilwoman Elizabeth Alcantar in Cudahy, Richmond, Oakland, Fujiang, who I mentioned earlier from Merced, also made a statement on the dais in support of a ceasefire. So there are things happening at local levels as well that folks have been pushing for, and thankfully not a lot of pushback against. You'll hear folks, especially kind of neoliberal and colonial talking heads on Twitter and the mainstream media, complain, oh, these people are supporting, I don't even want to give them the chance, like, what they normally talk about, and like the spin that they try to put on it. But we have a lot of folks at this time pushing for things at the local level. So again, I encourage you to, one, bug your own congressional member or your senator about these things, and then two, see what's going on locally for some of your city councils. Sometimes some folks want to push for stuff but don't know if they have community support at the time. So it's really important to have folks know that they are not alone in standing for what is right. I did say I would introduce the rest of the team. This is first page of our team. Our state director is former San Francisco supervisor Jane Kim. Jane started in last year. I've lost track of time. COVID time still very much real, people. But she is our state director. Our deputy director now, he just got a title change, is Jorge Contreras. He was a former organizer for WFP in Texas and helped lead that operation there. And then the senior federal affairs strategist is Adam Gold. In terms of who we are on the organizer side of things, this is us. Again, that is me up there in the top left. That is my email address. You can feel free to email me at any time. I am the California organizer statewide, which is why I host these meetings and anything that has to do with statewide organizing. We also have Alicia Creda, who's the social media manager and organizer, and she's based in the Bay Area. If you see any of our fantastic social media through California WFP, know that is 100% Alicia, because the rest of us do not have the artistic skills to compete with her there. We also have two Southern California organizers, Hannah Kessel, who is based in LA, and Laura Nguyen, who is based in herself Orange County, but she organizes OC, the Inland Empire, and San Diego. And then finally, but not least, we have Neil Sanapa, who is the senior organizer for the Central Coast and Central Valley. So he is the organizer for those two regions. And again, anything along the coast that is basically from Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara is considered the Central Coast, and then the valley itself is basically everything from SAC all the way down to like the northern parts of LA and the Inland Empire. With that, I like to leave time for questions at the end if folks have questions. Happy to answer them along the way, unrelated to anything maybe I talked about here, or questions or elaborations on things that were mentioned. I will try to get the link for you all. Let me... One of the final things I want to mention is we are very much a party not beholden to special interests, to corporations, and to a lot of the typical funding that we see political parties benefit from, and benefit in terms of funding their operations. So if you are interested and if you want to be, I encourage you to become a dues-paying member of the California Working Families Party. Any recurring donation, again, helps us to organize all of these different events that we host. Any recurring donation, again, it could be $1 a month. That counts. You're a dues-paying member. Congratulations. We understand that folks are in different economic situations. Maybe they can't give a lot right now. But honestly, every little thing helps. And you'd be surprised how much $1 a month can actually go towards in terms of some of the support that we give to these campaigns. But with that, I am at the end of my normal spiel. If folks have questions, feel free to let me know. I encourage and thank you all for joining us this evening. Hope it was helpful, useful information for you all. I enjoyed doing this. If you have feedback in terms of this YouTube space, feel free to let me know as well. I'll probably stay on for like the next couple of minutes if folks want to ask questions. But thank you, everybody. Or if you need me to go back to a previous slide too, just let me know. But again, thank you for joining us. So besides donating, and then again, don't feel obligated if you are not able to at this time. Let me pull up the... So the link I just dropped in the chat here is what we have for all of our upcoming events here as California WFP. As I mentioned before, holiday parties are something that you are more than welcome to attend at any point. I encourage you get to meet any of your local organizers who are going to be organizing those things. They will be there at those holiday parties, some of the elected officials. The other thing I would mention is the no funding phone banks that we're hosting on Wednesday. If you are able to, that would be a great thing. And I think another thing that I would suggest is, what do you want to kind of get out as being a part of WFP? I mean, one of the things that personally I enjoyed doing and supporting is supporting folks on what they want their journey to look like. If someone's like, hey, I'm really interested in doing social media work, I'm really interested in doing campaign work, or I'm thinking about running for office, reach out to myself. My email's right there on the slide, or anyone else, and just have a conversation with us. If you're local to any one of our areas, we can grab coffee, we can do anything, but really think about what it is that you want to learn more about and figure out more of, and we'll be there to kind of walk that path with you. I mean, it's really great seeing folks jump into the space after being disillusioned with the two-party system and being like, damn, I can actually participate in decision making for this stuff. Sometimes folks are kind of like, oh, I didn't know I had this kind of ability to be a member rep, for example, like be able to vote on some of these endorsements. They've never been able to vote on anything endorsement wise or policy wise. Or if you have questions like, hey, have you considered doing X, Y, and Z? Maybe you should do an event here at this location. Reach out to whoever your local organizer is or myself, and I think that is a good starting place to really kind of get involved with whatever you see as what you want to do. It all starts somewhere, and no one person's path is always going to be the same. But showing up to any of these events, staying in touch with what we have going on, all of these things are great ways to kind of stay involved and stay in the loop. Other questions folks have? Again, doesn't have to be about anything I talked about here. Maybe something I use jargon for. Great, fantastic. Yeah, we have a couple candidates in the IE. And yes, the infrastructure is definitely something that we want to support building out. I'm glad you were able to show up at the convention a few weeks ago. I'm glad to join. Yeah, I would reach out to Laura or myself, whoever you're interested in talking to. We had a canvas launch for Javier Hernandez this last Saturday, I believe. And I know we're going to continue doing more work down there as well. If folks have any other questions, now's the time to ask. Don't be shy. There are no stupid questions. There are no dumb questions. But thank you all for joining again this evening. I'll probably hang out for another 4 minutes if folks, again, want to ask questions. You're more than welcome to. Need me to elaborate on anything. Introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't yet. Not that you need to. Another thing too, actually, is if folks have ideas on what would be useful to learn more about. I know sometimes the party infrastructure of WFP or some of the things that we focus on may be confusing if you're brand new to spaces like this. So if there are things that you feel like would be a nice deep dive into, happy to do that. We have a lot of existing stuff, so it wouldn't be a hassle in any sense to put something together like, what does it look like to run a campaign from start to finish? Or like, how can I organize things locally if I'm interested in doing X, Y, or Z? We are a political party and, more importantly, a political home for folks. So with that, we like to support everything that folks need along the way. But thank you, everybody who joined. I will take it from the silence that folks don't necessarily have any other questions. But again, thank you. Actually, one last thing. I nearly dropped the ball on it. One thing I do want to share, I don't know why it didn't share immediately, was this is the link to our Discord. If you are familiar with Discord, you know basically what to expect. We do a lot of the organizing stuff and conversations here. We host movie nights every month. So it's a space not to just do political work, but it's a space to hang out and meet other folks who are interested in doing this work across the state. If you do not know what Discord is, it is basically the cooler version of Slack, if I can say so myself. I'm sorry if there's any Slack fans here, but it's, again, just a space where we can organize and do these things. So I encourage folks to hop on there, even if you don't participate in chat often. Just being there, you can get updates on things that we got going on. We are actually hiring for a NorCal organizer and SoCal organizer for WFP. So if you're interested in something like that, I want to share that with folks. The links are going to be in Discord. I believe I put them in the announcements channel. So again, use me as a resource. Talk to me on Discord. Reach out to me on email. Shoot me a message anywhere. I'm happy to converse with folks and really see where we can grow from here. With that, I will say good night, unless there's any final questions. Thank you again all for joining us this evening. Really excited to grow with folks and learn more about what you're interested in working on. Take care, everybody.